Welcome to Kanti's Kaleidoscope. I'm Drew LEIFHEIT. I'm a journalist investigating how corporations tick. So who better to talk to than Kanthi Ford? Kanthi has been helping international leaders in governments, multinationals, and not-for-profits to manage change for over 2 decades. Today, we're speaking about leadership and why it's important, what the characteristics of a good leader are, whether or not people are born leaders, and what you can do to be a better leader. Welcome, Kanthi Ford, to Kanti's Kaleidoscope.
Okay.
How's your day, Kanthi?
It's all right. The sun is shining, the sky is blue. What more can you ask in a
Sounds
day?
fantastic. Sounds like a good way to dive right into good leadership. First of all, how would you define leadership? What is it and what isn't it?
It's an interesting one because people just assume that if somebody is put in charge of a lot of people, that they're then a leader. The reality is, a leader isn't somebody who just tells people what to do. I think Aristotle definitely said that leadership is the art of persuasion, that you should be able to encourage people to follow you and you should be able to develop people. So he said that great leaders are great followers, um, which is slightly different from the mode of traditional leadership that we talk about.
It seems as if there's also almost a cult of leadership in global business culture. Is there anyone, when it comes to leaders, that immediately pops into your mind as a good leader?
History is absolutely rich, and note I say history, with people who are viewed as possible great leaders. You look at Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi. Um, they're all known for being provocative, making provocative declarations, but actually creating something that was impossible. John F. Kennedy was the same. We shouldn't have a man on the moon. Um, so those are the examples historically of great leaders. Um, if you're asking about the great leaders for today, um, I would um, I would think history has still got time to demonstrate whether they are great leaders or not.
Kind of pulling back a little bit, could you give us your thoughts on, whether leaders are born or are they, do they develop? What is it about a person that becomes a leader, or, can anybody do it, or are there people who are just sort of more prone to becoming leaders?
I was talking to a group of leaders yesterday in a workshop, and somebody asked whether emotional intelligence, you either were born with it or you weren't born with it. Because I always say that to be a great leader, emotional intelligence is essential. And that's so that you can understand other people's perspectives. It's that you can become more aware of other people. And this person genuinely believed you were either born a leader or you weren't. You were born with emotional intelligence or you weren't. And I was explaining that, all of these are just habits that we've not created yet. They're all things that we've got where, physically absolutely capable of developing empathy, developing emotional intelligence, developing leadership skills. That's why coaching for a leader is so essential because the more senior people get in the organization, the more decisions they're expected to make and the less feedback they give. I always recommend reverse mentoring. So the most junior person in an organization mentors the most senior person in an organization, because that way you get genuine feedback, because people do tend to become sycophantic in the current type of organization that exists.
Could you talk about some of the other traits that are, necessary for someone to be a good leader?
It's not just doing great things, it's also being able to be able to teach and follow what they believe in. Somebody who doesn't have the courage to oppose bad behaviors in an organization, for instance, or ignores the good things that people do, they're not leading. they're just creating a cult of themselves. Um, you kind of see leaders fall into different boxes depending on how mature the organizational culture is, how mature their thinking is. So, the classic old style military leader who believed that you have to line people up and tell them what to do and micromanagement. That's long since passed as a model. But unfortunately, an awful lot of people just immediately jump into that way of thinking.
The word boss came to mind when you made your comment. I'm wondering what you think about that. Are the days of boss are they still with us?
Unfortunately, yes, very unfortunately. When I work with companies where I've been brought in to help shift the culture, invariably you find one or two bosses, in inverted commas, who are actually creating a toxic culture. Because today's people want to think for themselves, want to do great things, and they actually want to make a difference. So bossing people around is not going to make that happen.
We were talking about the some of the most crucial traits for leaders. Could you provide an example of a specific trait and sort of how that serves both, let's say, the staff and the company?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first started in the job, it was my first role. I was nervous. I'd been asked to make a presentation to the senior team. And then I walked into the room. There was this group of people who were a lot more senior than I was, all sitting around, all talking. And I felt very outside of the whole situation. And the person in charge, the chief exec, got up and came over to me and said, "I'm so glad you could join us. We're really looking forward to what you've got to tell us." And I immediately felt at ease because he made me feel at ease. That to me is someone who's a great leader.
How would you isolate that as a trait?
Well, this was somebody who was taking a keen interest in somebody um, that they were leading. He was respecting them for who they were, for what knowledge they may bring to the table, and he was prepared to stand up and acknowledge that up front. Those sort of things are great, great personal characteristics. But to be a leader, you have to be courageous. Um, you actually have to stand up for some things that may not be universally popular.
As a leader, how crucial is it for that person to be able to delegate and recognize that specialists that work for them may know much more than they do in a specific subject, for example?
Oh, that's absolutely essential. It's something that some of the leaders on today's world stage, in the geopolitical sense, could be doing well to observe. Saying that everybody follows my lead without exception is actually nullifying the knowledge and values of the people around them. It is absolutely essential to recognize that none of us um, better than the rest of us when it comes to taking an organization forward. You have to use the whole diversity of ideas and knowledge and experience in order to come up with real focus going forward.
How difficult is it for leaders to balance, the interests of the organization versus the interests of the people that work for them?
Well, the two should be synonymous because if a great leader understands how to communicate with passion, with motivation, they will influence and encourage the people who work with them to also do that with their people, so that their people are aware of their organization's goals, their organization's intent, but also they're aware of what part they're playing in the eventual outcome of an organization. There's the old story of the man sweeping the floor during a rocket launch. And when somebody asked him what he was doing, he said he was contributing to the space mission. That's That's an example, a very old example of how everyone has got connection to leadership.
When tough times emerge, what how can a leader achieve a balance, for example, when let's say redundancies are likely necessary?
When I was working in a project, and the company had 34,000 people, and the intention was to reduce the numbers of people in the organization by almost a third. And what the leader of that organization did was to create a program where there were workshops where we explained what the organization wanted to do, explained his vision for the organization, and how he thought that the behaviors that he would be expecting as a result of that. And a high proportion of those people voluntarily chose to leave because they didn't want to be part of the new organization. So it did not make it um, the swinging cups that you hear about, where people are upset. So there is choice, because in life we all have choices, and the opportunities for those people were provided by giving them additional coaching, additional support as they were exiting the organization. So these things do not have to be, binary, black or white. They can actually be quite positive experiences if handled right by leaders with vision and effective communication who understand that it's worth making the effort. Depends how much they care about the other human beings that report.
Excellent point. What's the best way of measuring the success of a leader?
It's not the leader themselves. It's by talking to anybody else in their organization. When I walk in and out of different organizations and deal with people online from different organizations, I can tell what their leadership are like because of the people I'm talking to. Their culture's almost tangible, especially if you actually walk into an office that belongs to a certain company. You can guess what that company is from the behavior that you're witnessing.
That makes me think of cultures of fear a little bit. Have you ever
Absolutely.
encountered anything like that?
Absolutely. Cultures of fear, they go back to that old style, really reactive culture where I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose. Those kinds of mentalities lead to people being blamed because there's always somebody that's got to be wrong, never the leader. Those are really retrospective cultures, and I had hoped 20 years ago that they would be cultures of the past. But in times of great uncertainty, the bullies in this world, the people who like power, who've got the large egos, tend to fall into the trap of reverting to that old style, military, immature behavior.
In a sense, it's almost as if they are also afraid, no?
Of course, because they're not quite sure whether they know what they're doing or not. So therefore, they have to bully everyone else because my way is the right way. And that's never effective. The great attributes of a leader are to listen to understand what the people around them are telling them, to make the effort to see the impact of their decisions on the people who work at the front line in an organization, or the people that are cleaning the streets in the country, actually touching and feeling the culture that they're creating in the world. That's the sign of a great leader, not the somebody that sits in the rarefied air of an office or corporate headquarters and barks out orders and expects all their lieutenants to jump when they hear them.
Kanthi, given your network of working for governments and multinationals and NGOs, what are you hearing out there now? It is a time of uncertainty. How do you think leaders are facing and navigating through some of these big changes?
A lot of thought. Some are reverting to type and becoming quite command and control. Some are um, reluctant to make decisions because they're waiting to see. There's a lot of senior teams who are in a wait and see mode at the moment. Um, and some are afraid. Some organizations are actually afraid. And I had a conversation just today with a client, and they were saying that it's really strange that how people are actually afraid to speak up at the moment in case they say the wrong thing.
What kind of opportunity do you think this presents for leaders who'd like to up their game a little bit?
Leaders who'd like to up their game have got to believe that humans always, the good always overtakes the bad. You just need a critical mass of people. So those leaders to up their game need to start to think about their followers. Try to create and develop people to work with them so that they're all working from the same hymn sheet. That way they'll start to create great critical mass that is a positive critical mass to override any concerns or negativity that they can see.
Amazing, isn't it, that when there's real leadership, it's something that is very tangible for all of us. We can feel it, right?
Yeah, because there's a feel good factor. You talked about fear earlier. Um, People don't feel good when they're around fear. People just do stuff. But when people feel good, they feel motivated, they feel encouraged, that's when you start to create positive, dynamic human beings. And with that, you then create dynamic human generations and people aspiring to positive values.
As we push forward into this slightly tumultuous 21st century,
Mhm.
could you offer 3 tips for modern leaders?
Listen to understand. If you are going to be making great decisions, like huge decisions, if you're going to be making huge decisions, well, then consider all the outcomes and consult some trusted advisors. Don't start to make decisions on your own. And don't be afraid to start small and then change direction, but always explain to people what you're doing. Don't go for big, grandiose gestures to make the point. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction.
How would you approach the task of helping a corporate leader to upgrade their leadership in the 21st century?
Well, I coach a number of senior executives internationally on improving their leadership skills. And how I'd approach them would be very much dependent on their personality, first and foremost. I talk to the people who they work with. So I got some honest third party perspectives on who they are and how they show up at work. And then I'd play that back to them and try and identify what sort of a leader they want to be. Quite often, people start to revert to the model that they had when they were growing up. So it could be a head teacher, or it could be a parent, or an uncle, or a relative. So people haven't really thought through the type of leader that they would really like to be. And so we help them shape that, develop that, and sustain it. Because you've got to remember that people get very, very stressed when they're under pressure and they revert to what they saw was their comfort zone. So we have to help them develop habits that keep them heading forwards rather than reverting to their old style behaviors.
Change management expert Kanthi Ford, thank you very much for being on Kanti's Kaleidoscope.